Well, thank you to those of you who were able to join. I just want to start by introducing the four panelists we have today. My name is Jeannie Porges, and I'm a board member with SSDP. I've been with SSDP since 2020. I started at the DePaul chapter in Chicago, and I'm now doing student leadership at the Adler University chapter in Chicago as well. And we also have Maya Tatum and Sarah Noon, who are board members, and Jason Ortiz, who is the executive director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And I also am the leader of our current direct action committee. And so I'm leading the direct action events that we have planned coming up this spring. And so one of the events we have planned is this discussion and this webinar today to kind of lay out and debrief how we did our DC action to protest to legalize federal cannabis in DC this last fall. So to start off, I'd like to have Jason talk a little bit about what direct action is and give a little bit of history about what that means.
Thank you, Jeannie. So I'm going to just do the same training that we actually got before we did our direct action in DC. We're going to go over some of the background, some examples of direct action, what it is and what it isn't, a little bit about SSDP, and then we'll actually look at some footage of our work together that we did. We can debrief after watching it live, but want to make sure everybody knows SSDP's mission statement. We're here to end the war on drugs, the war on all drugs, and replace the war on drugs with sensible policies that are grounded in science, reason, and compassion, and making sure that all the communities that were impacted are healed and made whole. And a big part of that is making sure those that were incarcerated for cannabis or other drug crimes are not only released, but able to enter society, supported, and able to become full members and productive members of society. And so this was an action that we did with the Last Prisoner Project, who was our partner for this. And, shout out to LPP, Sarah Gersten, Steve D'Angelo, and all the folks that came out with us that were with us there then, so that, they helped us make it possible. And it was definitely Steve D'Angelo who really was the spirit behind this movement and made it happen and made it real. And so we definitely are appreciative of that. We'll see him a little bit in the documentary later on. But yeah, I'm going to go over a bit more about what exactly civil disobedience is. And at its core, it's refusing to obey unjust laws. And we do that in order to call attention to particular issues that we feel like are not getting the attention that they need. And in order to make sure that it becomes part of the agenda of those in power and at the top of the agenda, you may have to break some rules every once in a while and flip over a table or two, move some chairs around, drop an F-bomb on the news, whatever it takes to make sure folks are able to hear us and pay attention. But it's not something that is new. It's been something that's been going on for a very long time. In theory, thousands of years, right? As long as there have been laws that were unjust, people have been resisting them. And so the how we do it, the art form of civil disobedience, is definitely something that's been cultivated by resistance movements throughout the world and over a very long period of time. The most common example that most people know about, at least, is Gandhi, especially the Salt March that they did many years ago. While India was under colonialization of the British, they were being heavily taxed on things as simple as salt. And so as a point of resistance, they decided they're going to make their own salt and you're not going to tax any of it and y'all can come and stop us, right? And so Gandhi mobilized his people to actually make a march to a part of the Indian Peninsula that had very salty water to extract salt from the water. But the whole point was that they were saying no to the British. We're not going to follow your rules. We're going to produce our own salt, and we're going to use this act of civil disobedience as a way to show that we are not willing to continue to live the way we're currently living. And that movement gathered thousands, millions, maybe not millions, but hundreds of thousands of people behind him that ended up resulting in independence for India. And so it was the beginning of a huge movement that then eventually did lead to the liberation of his people. And so you never know, something like marching and protesting salt taxes that can really build a movement and create the space necessary for folks to feel comfortable resisting unjust oppression and talk about how they're going to do it. Another good example was during the early 1900s with the women's suffrage movement. In order to get the right to vote for women, they actually did it in a similar way. They would protest in front of the White House to draw attention to the fact that they were not able to vote, although all the folks that were working in Congress and the president's office at the time were men, and there definitely needed to be some better representation among our leadership. But they would actually chain themselves to the White House front gate and remain there until removed. And they did it many times, and it was very effective at drawing attention to the issue. And of course, as we all know, eventually they did earn the women's right to vote and use civil disobedience and direct action as one of their primary tools. It was a bit more, they were more violently approached when they were doing these tactics than many of us have now, or many even in history. And so they actually suffered quite a bit of actual physical aggression for their protests, but they stuck through it and were able to make it to the other side and actually win the right to vote. Another one here in the US that's probably the more known example for folks from the US is the lunch counter sit-ins. And so in Greensboro, Alabama, there were activists that refused to support the Jim Crow segregation laws and would sit in the lunch counters together, black and white and other folks together, saying, we're not going to leave. We're going to sit here just like every other citizen can. And if you all want to physically remove us, so be it. But we're not going to participate in your Jim Crow segregation. And so it started out with only a handful of folks. But as it got more press and more awareness, right, students started to join the charge. And that's where students really escalated the issue to broaden it into many communities and broaden it to a lot more different folks as part of society. And the lunch counter sit-ins, of course, was a big part of ending Jim Crow segregation in the South. And it was definitely a very classic example of civil disobedience, where they were resisting a very specific law where they weren't allowed to sit next to each other. And it was a very clearly racist law. And so by showing that and specifically targeting that one law, folks could better understand the full scope of what Jim Crow was really doing and how it was affecting people. If you're not even allowed to sit next to each other, you're clearly not a free society. And so because of their sacrifices, folks were, forced to confront the reality of the laws. And because of their courage and commitment to keep it going, eventually they were able to defeat Jim Crow's segregation as well. And then I wanted to use a drug policy example, and this one is actually from the late 80s, early 90s with ACT UP and the LGBTQ movement, when the AIDS crisis was at full force. And Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, who was one of the biggest drug warriors of all time, was also incredibly homophobic and was denying LGBTQ folks the right medicines and different types of support that they needed to deal with the AIDS crisis, and even blaming the AIDS crisis on the LGBT community for a large part of the 80s. And one of the things that was actually really helpful with addressing the symptoms of AIDS was medical marijuana or cannabis. And so those folks, it was cannabis access that was one of the biggest sources of resistance, in that they wanted the medicines they needed to survive, and they were going to use them whether the law said they were allowed to or not. And specifically in places like San Francisco and Northern California, the combination of LGBT folks that were also in the cannabis movement became a force to be reckoned with on this particular issue. And they were some of the folks that started a lot of the unregulated cannabis operations. There was a lot of buyers clubs for folks that were suffering from AIDS symptoms, that this is how they were able to get their medicine. They would meet up, they would buy it, they'd find it from local growers that were growing really good cannabis. And that was a big part of the late 80s, early 90s movement to address AIDS, and making sure that we looked at it from, again, a place of science, reason, and compassion, not punitive, draconian drug laws. And then the more recent one that some folks within SSDP might have heard about was actually when Sunrise did a sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office. Up to that point, Democratic leadership were ignoring the demands of the environmental movement, specifically the Green New Deal, not even getting any kind of conversation or policy implemented at all. And they decided, Sunrise movement decided to use a sit-in as a tactic in the leadership's office, like in Nancy Pelosi's office. And so this image here is actually from her office, where they sat in and refused to leave until she addressed the fact that we needed a Green New Deal, we needed to address climate change. And by bringing it to their office rather than, at a beach or, at a lunch counter or accessing cannabis in private, This was very public. It was in the congressional building, and that meant that other Congress people could see it and participate and join in. And actually, then brand new Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did join them in their struggle, and that elevated the issue dramatically. AOC did eventually introduce a Green New Deal bill shortly thereafter. Still struggling to get passed, of course. We may have to do some more civil disobedience to make it move a little bit. I mean, I don't know about this Republican Congress, but there's no doubt that it did escalate the issue in everybody's minds as being one of the more important issues that needed to be addressed at that time, and still so. And this one was very clearly students and young people were leading the entire show. And so students have always been at the forefront of civil disobedience. And in this particular one, they were the whole show. They were the ones organizing the whole thing. I'm going to skip past those ones. Here's a quick example of different types of civil disobedience: walkout, sit-ins, disrupting meetings. And I've ever seen folks that have disrupted a board meeting where they're going to raise your tuition, and you go in there and say, we don't want this to happen, and you stop the meeting. That's a type of civil disobedience. Blockades, where you don't let somebody leave a place. So for example, I believe it was in the 80s when the nuclear rights activists, folks that were opposed to nuclear power and nuclear bombs, would actually block the trucks from leaving to bring the various supplies to build more bombs. So instead of going to a legislator's office, they went to the places that were actually building the weapons and blockaded those spaces. Unofficial marches, occupations. I'm sure folks have remember Occupy Wall Street. There was occupations happening all over the place, debt refusal, and of course, giving away cannabis. Even to this day, anytime you give somebody cannabis, you are committing an act of civil disobedience because you're not supposed to be doing that. But obviously, lots of folks do it all the time. And so for everyone that has shared cannabis with somebody,
Did that freeze for everybody?
Yeah. Hey,
Oh,
Jason,
I'm sorry, you just froze.
could you
no.
repeat like the last like 1 minute of what you said?
How about now? I just got the alert that my connection was cutting out.
Yeah, you're good now.
Perfect. So I'll just do this one quickly, is where I think I was at. Just some examples of civil disobedience. There's lots more. We're working on building out more. We have some resources that have some pretty good examples, and we'll have to create new ones. That's the other thing too, is you can create all new tactics whenever you want that fit your situation. What is not civil disobedience is violence. And so the word civil in front of disobedience clearly relates to violence. There are folks that have all kinds of opinions on whether or not resistance needs to be nonviolent, and that's definitely a conversation that we can have. But for today's conversation, we're talking about civil disobedience. Property destruction is generally speaking not included. That is definitely one that philosophically there's lots of opinions on whether painting the side of a building is property destruction. It is definitely damaging it, but it is not destroying anything. And so like, is that okay? So for example, whether or not somebody can write, you're a murderer on the side of a general's office or something, right? And so that would be something you'd have to agree with your friends and your cohort and your cadre of whether that is appropriate for your particular action. But lobbying is not direct action or civil disobedience. It's using the most official channels. And so whenever you go along with the official channels, it's not civil disobedience. Still useful, still has its place, just not civil disobedience. Writing a letter to your elected representatives or a permitted march or a parade, right? Those are not civil disobedience. Those are rallies, still have a place. They're just not civil disobedience. And we have John Lewis, rest in peace, was somebody that has been an icon with civil disobedience, who eventually made it all the way to become a congressman, a very prominent congressman too. And so I included John Lewis specifically because he's a fantastic example of his commitment to the cause, not hurting his career in any way, shape, or form. It was definitely shaping his career through his work. And so a lot of times folks ask like, well, I get in trouble for this, or the folks that I'm possibly trying to get a job with care. Well, some of our greatest heroes throughout American history are folks that were committing civil disobedience. The tax revolts when the country was founded was civil disobedience. Maybe not quite as civil as we would think of today, but but I'm going to leave it there. That's a good run through of the various histories. And then I'm going to switch it over to the current time of what we actually did and show a couple of videos. First, we're going to start with one featuring Maya as our amazing press secretary. And then we're actually going to show the clip from us in National Geographic. And then we'll open it up to Sarah and Maya's experience. But first, let's hear how the press spoke about us.
President Joe Biden announced plans earlier this month to pardon people convicted of simple possession of marijuana. But protesters who gathered outside the White House today say he is not moving fast enough to deliver on that promise.
Protesters at the White House who are calling on President Biden to release 420 people held on marijuana possession charges before Christmas. Phoenix resident Maya Tatum says it's not too much to ask.
No one should be in prison for plant medicine, especially something like cannabis, when you have white men that are making billions of dollars off an industry that has historically disenfranchised Black and brown communities.
Tatum helped organize the rally by Students for Sensible Drug Policy that came more than 2 weeks after the president announced his 3-point plan. In addition to pardoning an estimated 6,500 people with federal possession charges, it calls for governors to follow suit. And it calls for administrative officials to look into the possibility of downgrading marijuana on the schedule of drug offenses.
Joy to see so many people get engaged and really be responding to this event in a positive manner and support what we have to say and share their lived experience with us about their family members and things that are in prison.
Arizona voters in 2020 voted to legalize marijuana for adult personal use. That measure also allowed for people with state-level possession charges to have their records expunged. But as with the feds, Tatum says the state is dragging its feet on what protesters call cannabis clemency.
From my understanding, no one's record has been expunged yet, and that process started last year.
When asked for a response to the protest, a White House spokeswoman today reaffirmed the president's commitment to ending prosecutions that have, quote, upended too many lives for conduct that many states no longer prohibit. Tatum and other protesters today said they are pleased that President Biden has talked since the campaign about easing up on marijuana possession charges, but that was 2 years ago, and now they want to see action.
The overcomplication of the expungement process allows for there to be a breakdown where no one actually gets the help that they need. And we need our families and friends' records expunged. We need them out of prison. And that's the bottom line.
In Washington, Haley Smilo, Cronkite News.
Protesters plan to move their rally later today to the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, where the president was scheduled to meet with campaign workers.
And that's the bottom line, because Maya Tatum said so. All right, and then let's see, is it gonna make me do ads again? No.
Incarcerated on marijuana-related charges. Users, growers, and dealers alike. October 6th, 2022. President Biden took a step toward his campaign promise to decriminalize marijuana.
I'm announcing a pardon for all prior federal offenses for the simple possession of marijuana. I'm calling on all governors to do the same for state marijuana possession offenses. Too many lives.
Some cannabis activists say that this is a step in the right direction.
Time that we right these wrong. No one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana.
Still, many say the policy and the president don't go far enough.
Today, it is important that we get our friends and family, our comrades out of jail for cannabis offenses. I'm here today to voice their
and demand the release of the thousands still in prison, still with records, withheld access to opportunity and basic human rights, suffering from cannabis prohibition.
The public wants real. We don't want fake. We don't want no malarkey.
The president was very clear. He was explicit. He said it in a nationally televised debate, speaking directly to voters. Everybody gets out. Records expunged. He didn't qualify it. He didn't say it applied only to simple possession. And we want the president to keep his promise.
State can free federal cannabis prisoners, but tens of thousands remain jailed by states and municipalities.
Today, you look at some of my friends who are getting out of prison. That would not have happened in states like Illinois and New York, which have passed cannabis legalization, not by initiative, but by the state legislatures.
This is primarily an issue of justice and freedom. Freedom to be able to consume relatively non-toxic plant in the privacy and safety of your own home. When you look at it through this.
All right, I think we can leave it there. Great press all around. Everybody did a fantastic job. Probably the best press I've ever had in an act of civil disobedience. Like, it was just perfect. So I'll leave it there, kick it over to Maya, who helped make that press positive result happen. But yeah, great work, everybody. We did it.
Yeah, Maya, would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience talking to the press and what that looked like and felt like for you?
Yes, of course. So doing press for this event was absolutely exhilarating. I was actually really excited to do it. I have some experience in public speaking, though I've never worked directly with the press. And so I was confident that like the skill set that I have would be good in the role. And I actually did a lot better at being the press secretary than I thought I was. But it was absolutely exciting. Like, I love just being in the know and like having a key and vital role. And so it was nice to be able to like keep my little clipboard that you see me there with. I had that and I was writing down all of the important press that was there and making sure that I was talking to them and I was giving them our press releases and the press release from LPP and just really making my rounds. And so it was exciting. I didn't feel like it was a whole lot of pressure. Like, at first it was because I was like, oh my God, I have to get interviewed. But then I was like, what are you talking about? It's you, like, you can do this. So I was like, okay. So once I got out there and I was like in the field working, it was amazing. Like, I 100% enjoyed it. I would do it again. And yeah, it was very exciting. And just it felt good to be the person that the news outlets would come to as they're watching, you know, everyone play their key role and folks are protesting and stuff, being able to get like the synopsis of what was happening, why we're there, why it's important. And me being in a position to be able to convey that was really cool. And so, yeah, I enjoyed it and it kept me on my toes. You know, I had to stay up to date with what was happening as developments happened, made sure that I was like putting out in real time press releases. And so that was also pretty exciting because I just had to be on alert. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a great experience.
Yeah, you know, listening to like everything you said and reading it in articles, you know, there's just like, it's like, yes, you know, so many snaps. And I just wonder, like, did you get any specific kind of training to talk to the press, or was all of this training through your public speaking class?
It was a little bit of both. So I touched base with Jason, and LPP connected me with kind of their media relations person, and I got some very brief instructions on kind of how to talk to the press, and things like that. But I have always been the kind of person where I can just wing it. And so I do better when I'm like in the moment, in real time, someone asks me a question and I can just fly off the handle with the answer. And so a lot of it was like keeping in mind what I was told, like obviously make sure I'm saying the name of our organization and who we're working with and why we're here, hitting those main points. But everything else I said really just came from me. And like I spoke from my heart. That's how I felt. It's what I believe in, it's what I stand by. And so I think that made it a lot easier too, because this is something I'm passionate about. So it made it more, I guess, just like easier, and it was comfortable for me to just talk about these things on such a platform.
Yeah, definitely. And I was wondering, not necessarily in relation to the press, but just in general, what was your favorite part of doing the direct action in DC?
I definitely would say my favorite part was for sure doing press, just because I had a lot of fun doing it and like running around. But I would say, I'm trying to think, there was a lot of things that excited me. I loved when we pulled out the big joint. Like when the inflatable joint came out, I was like, okay, it's getting real. We're about to hit this corner. We're relocating. It's go time. And then you just see like all these people walking, and there's this huge freaking joint following them. It felt like a very surreal moment for me to be in Washington, D.C., I don't know what street we were on, but be by the White House, have that street shut down, and you just have all of these forces of nature out there. We're all protesting, we're all in the moment. And then there's like this all hail the joint moment because it just appeared. Like that was a very like surreal moment for me. And I would definitely say that was one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I'd like to talk a little bit now about Sarah's experience working as someone who risked being arrested and was really at the center of like our goal in doing this direct action event. Sarah, would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, again, I don't know where to begin. There's a lot, but I think where I want to start is for those who want to risk civil disobedience, who want to do this, just know, I think cops are they are trained in these situations to not try to react to you. So you do have to just act. If you want to escalate, you need to be very intentional of how you're going to do that. Expect that if that does happen, and we had a brief training the night before that was very helpful, they will want you to pee in a cup. They check for very few specific drugs, so just keep yourself clean for at least 3 weeks beforehand if that's something you are worried about. Also, just keeping in mind that it's an adversarial system. Like, yes, we knew we were here for a point, but that doesn't mean that when you are arrested that you should just talk to them. So let the lawyer do that. It was really good that we did have somebody on deck to do that. So just don't answer questions, even though it's clear you have nothing to hide. Unfortunately, the justice system, as we know, it does not work according to truth. It's out to get you. So those are the biggest points. Again, like I said, there were several of us risking arrest. I don't remember exactly how many. I was the only one that actually did get arrested. That was because they were definitely making a point of not acting on our attempts to block streets and to not get on gates. And I made the decision when I saw the opportunity to run through a gate that was not open to citizens, and that is when that happened. So that's a direct choice. Again, I think an important point of this kind of work is you have to act in the moment very much. It's like you just need to really go understand why you're there and act according to that. And you might have some regrets later. Everything can always be done better. But it's just making it happen is what you're going to do. So there's no really good direction, especially when you know the state's not right on how to navigate that. So just trust your gut that you're in the right boat and that you're there for the right reasons. And just keeping it a straight face and being strong. I will say they don't feed you. They don't really give you much water. They had told us to carry on us what we might need. So I brought medications that I had. I want to say that was probably one of the biggest disappointments, is that even though I made sure to get arrested with my medication, I also made sure to not get arrested with my phone. I don't know what they were going to do with that. I would recommend don't do that if you can. I did write a phone number on my arm, so I was able to call that number when I was in there and talk to Jason and Rob. And shoot, I forgot the point that I was trying to make a little second ago. stay strong. Also, if you get the chance to talk to other prisoners in there, I gotta say, there was only one other white person that I was in contact with during that entire time. And I learned a lot just understanding how people end up there in the first place. That was unfortunate. I could go on and on what that 26 hours was like. Oh, I wanted to make the point that they don't feed you, and they also don't like make sure to have your medication on standby. They take everything that they arrested you with, and they keep it at the precinct that you're arrested at. So even if they take you somewhere else, like they leave you at the courthouse, which is where I was picked up, they had to drive me back to the closest precinct that I was arrested near to grab my stuff, and that included the medications and things that I intentionally tried to get arrested with. And it was weird when I showed up there, like, what medications do you take? And I'm like, this, and that. And they're like, oh, we don't have those. And it's like, what do you mean? I made sure I got arrested with them. Like, that's so freaking weird. And then the only food they were offering was bologna sandwiches. So that is not very nutritious. And there was not a second that I got away from bright ass fluorescent light. So I'll just leave that there. Not nice at all. It will drive you crazy. I was there for 26 hours, I think. That was around that time. And by the end of it, I did not feel great. So
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you also for, being that person to risk arrest. I was wondering, did you have any specific types of training to talk to the police or to talk to, like, were you trained to deny a conversation and to wait for a lawyer? How are you trained to keep yourself safe? That's what I want to know.
there was just that one night of training beforehand, and someone who I need to really highlight in this is Adam Eidinger. I think that's his name. I think that's how I say that. He was the person who pointed me to like the open gate and said that was civil disobedience. And then I was like, okay, guess that's what I'm going to try to do. So that was like a second decision. That was very fast. He was also the person who told us about, they're going to want you to pee in a cup. And even if you just refuse not to, they might not even let you leave until you do. That just might be something that the judge wants. Yes, he was also the person who like was getting me and other SSD peers to try to say like, hey, can we talk to these cops about like getting staff members to talk to us? Like, we're not here to just protest. We're here to like get something done. We want to not be here. We want to leave. We're not trying to just cause ruckus. Like, there's have a demand for you to live up to your promise, and we'd like to talk to some staff members instead of just being here treated as if we're like not citizens and we're just like only approached by cops. Like, this was not a criminal act. So it was actually kind of funny because I did try to talk to cops about like, hey, can you talk to staff members? And the message was, well, that's not their job. But so I didn't make any headway. They gave me a few phone numbers. Those didn't work. One of them was like, we're open from this time, from 12 to 3. And it was like in 2 days. And it was like, no, we're here right now. And so it was actually kind of funny because as I was sitting, like after I'd gotten arrested and I was sitting on the sidewalk with my hands behind my back and cuffed, there was one of the guys that I tried to talk to came up around us, and he's like, I guess your conversation didn't work out, did it? And it's like, it didn't even happen. So that's why we're here. So yeah, I got to give like a lot of credit to him. In the future, if we give like another training on how we can but how do we get around that? How do we get a phone number that actually works to try to talk to staff members directly is something we really need to work on, because it hasn't always been that you couldn't get on White House grounds, that you were so separated and blocked off and walled off.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, that definitely sheds some light on, what it was like to be part of that experience. Now, similarly to Maya, what was your favorite experience, favorite part of the direct action, like in general? Sorry, Sarah, did you hear what I asked?
I thought you asked about training. Did you ask me about my favorite part?
I did ask you about training and you answered that. Now I'm wondering, what your favorite part is, just like I asked Maya.
Oh, so sorry. I didn't really. Okay, so actually, I think my favorite part was, I think I didn't feel a lot of fear and anxiety after I'd been arrested, because there was this whole group of people, all SSD peers, right in front of me. I hate to put it this way, like, I mean, it just kind of like became this way, but they were like, everyone was chanting my name. I felt the support. I was joking around with the cops. Like I felt very comfortable, and that definitely would not have been that way without SSDP. And like I realized like when I was in there, like that you guys were waiting for me for so long, like Jason, a few other SSDPers, Maya, like you guys were there. And so that was comforting and really, really helpful because this was all of this was new. And the only thing keeping me really happy was knowing that my buddies were on the other side waiting. So that was cool.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. Or sorry, thank you, Sarah. Gosh, it's been a long day for me. Jason, I'd like to ask you the same question as everyone else. What was your favorite part of the direct action?
Yeah, this one was one of my favorite actions because it was so dynamic. And I actually think the favorite part was when we got pizza in the street, because that was the point where it's like, we're really taking over the whole street and just like eating lunch and figuring out what we're going to do next to escalate. And so that was a surreal point. Like that was definitely where it was just like, I'm just going to take a breather. And like, it was just wild that it was happening. And so that was the part that like brought me the most joy, right? Was definitely where everybody, like we did it. We took the street, we have their attention. And at that point now, how do we escalate? And it hadn't been particularly scary up to that point or anything either. And so, it felt pretty good about like how things had went. And I had expected us to not even get to that point. And so to actually be in a space where we just were like holding space by the side of the White House, that was kind of a win by itself. And so that was definitely my favorite moments in the whole process. But it was the first time where I had to negotiate. Like I had never done that before. It was always, I'm pretty sure I'm getting arrested. I'm just going to do the thing. You're going to arrest me, and that's going to be that. But they were like, we're not going to arrest you. And so I definitely was not expecting that, where they would just let us take the street like that. So that was the part where I definitely feel like we can, I could have done a better job, but I didn't really know like what to do. Like to the point earlier is like, who do I even ask for in this? And to Adam's credit, he did bring that up the day before. But when you're thinking about civil disobedience, you're always so worried about like the worst case scenario and what can happen. And so we didn't really plan as much for like the best case scenario. And so that I think was a strong learning experience, that when we do it again, having the folks that we can at least have their names of the people that are inside the building, or other folks that can speak for us, or folks inside the White House, inside the building, that's definitely a part of this that we hadn't even considered, right? Of like, do we have anybody in there that could maybe relay this conversation for us? So that was the part that was the biggest challenge, because I really had like, Capitol Police and FBI and like all these fancy alphabet departments being like, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm doing what I want to do. we're taking the streets. That's what I wanted to do. What do you mean? And so, it was just a very new experience that like I could come up with demands, and not like we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but it was, I did negotiate with the police and threatened to escalate multiple times. Like that was another part of it, where it's like, I got to do this nicely, right? Where it's like, they're not going to get real angry with me, but I need them to take it serious, that like we are going to do something that's going to be a pain in the ass for their bosses, right? So that was the part that I most enjoyed as far as like a growth moment for myself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never considered either like the how you negotiate in a situation like that. That's just really interesting, and it'll be exciting moving forward to talk more about how we can do that better in the future. Yes, Sarah brought up something in the chat real quick about wanting to talk about the Secret Service calling her mom. I'm interested in hearing about that.
Sorry, it's not a very big important thing, but I just wanted to point out that like yeah, I purposely didn't say anything to my mother, and I didn't think at all about like what would happen. So I just wanted to bring up the fact that like, yeah, if you do go to a White House protest and the Secret Service does arrest you, like they're probably going to investigate your family, and they're going to know where they work, and they're going to communicate them. Like they called my mother and they're like, yes, we're in the building next to you, and I'm calling to ask if your daughter is a harm to Joe Biden. And it's funny because my mom didn't even know I'd been arrested. So she starts going on like, oh no, that's just what she does. She's just a very passionate young woman, and she worked for the Biden campaign. And my mom here trying to, and then they're like, she wouldn't answer any questions. And my mom's like, well, I probably shouldn't either. Like, there's probably a reason. And just saying that at the end of the day, I feel a little bad that's how she found out. So just I hope that anyone who does this, that your family's supportive. So just beware that I also, when I did this, had no I didn't even think and consider any impacts on my own family or people that were close to me, or how that would impact anybody outside of me. So that was something interesting.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you so much. That's also something I never thought of. And just, yeah, it's something to definitely like prepare for moving forward. I see Justin is on the call now. Justin, would you like to tell us a little bit about what it was like for you to be at the direct action and like what your role was?
Yeah, definitely. I can answer those in reverse order. I helped with a lot of the behind the scenes logistics, just like fundraising, figuring out travel logistics for people who were taking part in the protest. And throughout that period, it was actually a really complex, kind of intense a few days for me, because I was like really interrogating if I wanted to risk arrest or what role I wanted to do, because I was actually given options. I'm a photographer, so I could take photos, and that's, as you can see, what I ended up doing. But I didn't really know if I was going to take part in it or not until the day of. I was kind of sick, and so that was a component. Another thing was like I was really scared, to be honest. I was really, really scared about being arrested. I have, familial history like in authoritarian regimes where you can't really trust the police. So it was like the sense of like, I don't know if they're going to treat me in a just way, but I also am really passionate. So I was really kind of interrogating that throughout the whole time. And the day of, I mean, it turned out to be like has been said before, incredibly dynamic, unexpected, at times absurd. The whole pizza thing was like I remember sitting there and watching Maya Seal, another one of the board candidates, like just waving the rainbow flag. We're listening to Dead Prez, and like the literal like M1 is like literally there, and then we're like dancing and eating pizza, and then I'm just like I'm really here in Washington DC doing this. Like I couldn't, it was just so absurd. And then when Sarah got arrested, it was completely unexpected to me. Like I literally was following Maya Seal again with a flag, trying to get like a nice photo, and I just happened to like turn over, and I just see Sarah like kind of like happily kind of like go into the gate, and I was like, what are you doing, dude? What? Like no one prepped me for that. And then I just saw like one person, one Secret Service officer grab her kind of like calmly, like she was confused too. And then like this other Secret Service guy came over, and he was like hella mad. And then I had my camera, and I was just like filming it. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? Like I was like, Sarah, like I'm here. And I saw, and then it was so shocking when like, Sarah had the flag, and like they pushed her onto it, and it looked so dramatic. Like the thing just broke like on her ribs, and I was like, holy crap, like what? And then the Secret Service officer turned around, and this is in the video that was posted. He just yelled at me. He was like, get back, and like just the visceral like anger. I was like, dude, what? Like really intense for me personally. And just the kind of like chaos verging on like fear, but also like, okay, it's kind of fine, everyone's here, we're like, what the hell? Yeah, it was a very fascinating experience. I'm really proud of everyone, like the leadership and the bravery of everyone that was involved, and I feel just like the honor to have witnessed that event, being with my peers, kind of realizing like we can do this, and we don't, not everyone has to be on the front lines. Like we can all kind of take and contribute our own, based on our own skills and our own tolerance levels, and that's needed. And I always felt like there was a lot of gratitude for from all of my other peers saying like you contributed to this, and that felt amazing. And yeah, it's just amazing. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that's actually a really important point, that like there's a lot of different roles within this work, and you don't have to risk arrest or even really like be involved in the actual like act of like protest. You can just be there, you can be involved in the behind the scenes work. You can be like me. I was kind of like doing like the way behind the scenes stuff, and I wasn't even at the event, which was sad, but I had midterms. But anyway, yeah, thank you. And you talked a little bit about how the pizza was so absurd. Was that your favorite part too, or did you have a different favorite part?
No, yeah, that was definitely my favorite part when Jason was sharing that. I was like, yeah, same. It was just so funny, so like relaxed. It reminded me of like Pride, just the music in the street, just the atmosphere is beautiful. Beautiful moment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And then I think Sarah wanted to respond regarding, that very visceral description of her being arrested.
I just want everyone to like get to know that I was sharing an Airbnb with Justin that night prior to that. And I don't know. I'm so grateful that you did record that. It looks so much more dramatic than it was. And that really, I think, was a key moment in making sure that I didn't catch a charge. Honestly, really grateful because it looks so intense for no reason. So thanks for covering that. That really was such a key moment. I feel weird saying that it was like the most important thing, maybe just for me and my own record, but like for like there's so many important moments, but I don't have Justin, so much love for you. You're definitely like my buddy that day. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
You covered that so well.
Can I just add something about the press aspect of that really quickly? So for me, I was actually eating lunch when all of that happened because I couldn't have the pizza because of my dairy allergy. So I had walked to go get lunch. And so I'm sitting in like a little restaurant bar eating a burger, and my phone starts blowing up. I mean, I was getting phone calls and text messages, signal messages, and people are like, Maya, where are you? Where are you? Sarah just got arrested. And so I'm literally like halfway through a burger and I'm like, I need this to go. And I like rush out of the restaurant and come over to where the scene was. And I'm standing there like vaping because I'm stressed. And I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? And so like from a press aspect, because I wasn't there to like actually witness it, what I had to do was then look at the video footage that Justin had and that others had gotten and kind of synthesize what happened from what people were telling me and the videos. And in real time, I had to write a press release about you being arrested and what that looked like and what that meant for our action. And so yeah, that was like super intense, very crazy. And I just remember like in that moment, I was like, oh shit, I'm pressed. Like I have to go. I was like, I can't, like I have to be there on the spot. And so it was definitely intense, but it's one of those things where it's like when you do stuff like this, especially from a press aspect, you have to be like on top of things and things are going to happen in real time. And you have to be ready and prepared to like draft up those memos and those released to get them sent within moments of it happening. And so I kind of felt like a little journalist, to be honest. I was like, this is news and it's happening now. But yeah, it was very, very intense, very intense.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much, Maya, for sharing. I think that's like a really unique experience of having to like synthesize the information in that way. And I think you did a great job. I don't think anyone could have told the difference that you weren't there. So does anyone else have any final thoughts or comments before we wrap things up?
I think it's interesting, like the food aspect, because we didn't plan for it to last like 8 hours, right? And so like at a certain point, we had to take shifts of like what was gonna happen, and like we had to make decisions in the moment, right? And so like food, and one of the things when we did decide to like leave the road, we could have done that differently, right? Like we could have kept the road and moved over and like brought all the supplies, right? Like that was another thing that Laura Goodfield from the GW chapter mentioned, was that we could have come with coolers full of food, right? And like plan to be here, like we're going to be here as long as it takes. If you're going to wait us out, we'll be here till tomorrow. right? And we'll have this party here till tomorrow. That was something that we hadn't considered at the beginning because we were very much making sure everything was safe and we thought it was going to happen relatively quickly, and it didn't. And so I think moving forward, that's a whole nother aspect of like how folks can help a direct action, is being able to provide all of those human resources, knowing where the bathrooms were, right? Knowing folks have certain food allergies, making sure we have that all ready to go. And I really think that that's super important. And also I do want to point out again to Justin's efforts as like, this wasn't what it was called, right? But like being the legal observer that captures a situation from our perspective, right? So that we have video of how it went, not just relying on the actual press or, you know, other organizations. And it's true that like having folks there to capture what's happening is not just for press afterwards, but it's to protect folks legally. So we know exactly what happened, right? And so there's just so many different pieces. And I think my favorite like overall thing was just how all the pieces fit together. Everybody really did trust each other in the moment and really crushed whatever it was that they were doing, right? The folks that were doing press, crush it on press. The folks that were doing civil disobedience did the civil disobedience, right? And so it was very, you know, distributed in the responsibility, but I didn't feel like folks, you know, dropped the ball in any sort of way. Like everybody rose to the occasion of the moment. And there was, I don't know, probably 30 of us or so there. And so, you know, it doesn't take an army to make a big impact, right? We took dozen SSDPers, right? And maybe another dozen allies and supporters. And we're able to shut the White House down for an afternoon and get all kinds of good press and make it to National Geographic. And so it really does show like a small group of committed citizens can really have a huge impact. And so like a chapter or a couple chapters working together can shut down your state capitol and stop a bad bill from being passed or make sure something really good gets passed. And so I think moving forward, that's kind of where SSDP can be a space for folks to learn about that. But also if folks want to do these types of actions locally, we can provide you with expertise. We have folks that are experienced press secretaries, folks that are experienced in doing civil disobedience, and you have this tremendous network of folks that you can pull on wherever our next action is going to be. And I think for those folks that are interested in that, definitely contact Jeannie. We're looking for opportunities in the right space to continue this work. And, you know, I think this is just the beginning of a lot of what we can do together. And we will do policy, we do chapter organizing, and we also do direct action.
Yeah, that's a great way to start closing this off. I just sent a link in the chat, Justin, if you want to fill out that form. It kind of it's just to assess for your availability doing our next direct action event, which will be a lobby day in DC, and to kind of just assess if you're interested in participating in our working group meetings going forward. They'll be every 2 weeks. At least for the spring while we're working on this set of direct action events. And yeah, we really need more chapter support, so we're going to be sending it out to more chapters as well. Trying to think if there's anything else to add. Yeah, I don't think so. Thank you so much for attending, Justin. And oh yeah, for anyone who's watching this as a recording, you can because you won't have access to the survey that I just sent, you can send me an email at ssdp.board.org, or you can send an email to Jason as well, and we can get you started with direct action work.
I think the recording does save the chat, does it not?
I think you might have to set it to do that. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I think that there's a way to do it. I don't know if we did that, but
It saves the chat, but it doesn't show it in the replay of the video. And so there are ways to do it, but it's a little complicated. But we can like get the information, but the viewer can't really see it.
okay. Well, yeah, email Jeannie or board@ssdp.org if you didn't remember that.
Yes. We look so excited.
I know, it's so good. And all the
really,
yeah.
I was just saying, we really got some like iconic shots like on this
Yeah.
action day. Like so much good content and footage came out of that action day. Very proud.
One quick thing I'll just mention too, for this is another role that was super helpful, and Henna played this role, but the design of the things we're going to hold in the action, right? Like we need a lot of designers to pull this off, actually. And so that's a whole nother space of like communicating the message appropriately, right? And it's not normally what you think of like participating in civil disobedience, but it's one of the most important parts, because if it's unclear what it is that we're asking for, we won't get as much press and support, right? And so like this banner was very explicit, right? It was like, can't really misunderstand what we're asking for there. But in the future, right, like having beautiful, more colorful things, right? Maybe the black and white helped because it was really like distinct and you can see it, but that's a whole nother part of this, that the artists, like we actually need artists to be able to communicate effectively and powerfully, right? This is clear, but it's not necessarily an attractive design. And so learning how we can bring the artists in to help us convey that message is such a big part of direct action civil disobedience. And we always welcome more of that. And even, you know, the big joint, right? Like that was an art piece, that was a sculpture that was created that had a huge impact in how it all looked and how, you know, we got press over it, right? And so I don't want to leave out the folks that are the artists and the designers and the people producing music and like all these other pieces, because it's what really rounds out an action and makes it compelling and emotionally compelling to the viewer, is the art behind it. And so for all the artists out there, please hit us up. We need more artists in the Direct Action Committee. And I think it's a great place for folks that, you know, maybe aren't going to be out in the streets, but still want to help.
And sorry, on that note, I think next time, because we definitely had staff members looking at us, having signs that say like, we are here to negotiate, like, talk to us if we should be talking to you, like that's a lot of words. Maybe there's a quicker way to do that, but making it more clear that we're not just here protesting, like we're trying to talk to somebody in that building. That's why we're in front of your building.
Yeah, and I think communicating to the folks in the building, right? Because like it was our first time, so we really were talking to the press. But like when you get a bit more comfortable, you actually want to create an emotional situation inside the building, right? So that they're arguing with each other, should we go talk to them or not, right? And that's the, you know, next level of civil disobedience, where your messaging is actually causing friction within your target's office or, you know, department. And that's again where like a giant sculpture or something, or a huge banner, we could have had that, like, you know, we come in peace, we're here to negotiate, right? Like in ginormous form, would have been really cool. And I think we can definitely explore that for whatever the next one we do is.
Good work, everybody. There will be future times.
It was a big success and everybody looked gorgeous. Like everybody looking great. And we're going to have these pictures forever, setting up the whole next generation of SSDPers to look at these beautiful things and be like,
it's really amazing. No, it's really amazing. Like for me, I've been in the org for like 10 years, since 2013. And I feel like that action, the footage that came from it kind of offset the new generation of like, these are the new SSDPers, the new face of the org. And this is what we do. We mean business. And so, yes, I will, like I said, I'll show my kids this and these videos and I'll be like, yo, mama was famous.
I love it. Yeah, you're on TV, you know, like that counts.
It does.
And Maya will get to train the future SSDPers. Like, well, on my day, we just took the streets and brought some pizza. We didn't have all the technology.
Yeah. Oh, great stuff. We did great.
Yes, definitely. Thank you all so much for your commitment and to just stepping up to the challenge. Like, I couldn't have expected it to go as amazing as it is, and because of all of y'all and all the SSDPers at home that supported us.
Yeah.
Jason, do you want to pause the recording?
All right. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you soon next time in the streets of your town.
Mm-hmm.